Hi students, welcome to Sunil's tutorial. I am Sunil Mirwani and today we will be doing foreign exchange arithmetic. We are going to do covered interest parity theory today. Let's see this. Suppose if they tell you that find best alternative for borrowing INR 12 million for 3 months. I want to borrow 12 million Indian rupees. Now, what is the best alternative? The exchange, you can borrow from any one of the currency. You have three currencies given to you. You have USD, Euro, and Great Britain pound. Right, spot rate is given to you as 40.1245, 54.1650, 80.0650. 3-month forward rate is given to you as 40.2765, 54.20, 80.0350. Interest rates are given to you as 4.25, 5.5 and 6%. Right? These are the three currency exchange rates given to you. You have to decide from which country will you borrow 15 million INR. You have to decide from which country you are going to borrow 12 million INR. Right? Now, you will borrow from that country where you have to pay least interest. You will also borrow from that country where you get maximum currency advantage. When I club the two up, that is called as my net liability. I have to pay some interest and there is going to be some either currency advantage or disadvantage. Let's see this. First, let's consider net liability when borrowing in USD. Borrowing, that means I have to pay interest. Interest is PNR upon 100. Right? Now I want to borrow 12 million. 12 million is 1 million is 10 lakhs. This is 120 lakhs I have to borrow. Right? Now when you have to borrow, how do you borrow? You are going to borrow today and you are going to return the money after 3 months. So you have to divide by the spot rate 1245 E plus PNR. This is the amount I'll get. This is the amount I have to borrow in terms of US dollars plus NR. And interest rate is 4.25 upon 100 for 3 months minus the principal amount I will have to return back. What is the net liability that I will have to pay if I borrow in US dollars? Guys, whatever amount you have to borrow, divide by the spot rate 1 plus NR upon 100 into 12 minus the principal amount. That's your formula for borrowing. Right? So when you calculate this, this will work out to, okay, wait, I didn't reconvert this back. I have to reconvert this back to US dollars. This was US dollars converted to Indian rupees. When I am going to return the money, I'll have to convert it back to US dollars. I'm going to convert it back to US dollars after 3 months. So this is going to be 40.2765 minus 120 lakhs. Guys, the amount that you want to borrow, divide by spot rate 1 plus NR upon 100, multiply by forward rate minus the principal amount. Right? When you solve this, you will get this answer as the net liability that you will have in Indian rupees is 173,441.5. The net interest or the net expense that will be incurred If I borrow from US, bring the money to India, keep it for 3 months and send it back to US, is going to be 1,73,441.5 rupees. Fine, do we get this thing here? Next, let's find out the net liability when borrowing in euros. If I'm going to borrow in euro, I have to borrow 120 lakhs. The spot rate of euro is 54.1650. 1 plus interest rate is 5.5 upon 100 into for 3 months I have to borrow. Reconvert the money. If I reconvert this, I have to send it back to euros. So the forward rate is 54.2 minus 120 lakhs. Simple formula, whatever is the amount you have to borrow, divide by spot rate, 1 plus NR upon 100, multiply by forward rate minus the principal amount again. When you do this, your liability in Indian rupees, the cost of borrowing will be 1,72,860.72. So if you borrow the money from US, I have to pay 1,73,000 rupees as my liability. The net interest, transfer charges and the exchange difference will work out to 1,73,000. If I borrow in euros, my net liability will work out to 1,72,000. Third, if I borrow in Great Britain pound, net liability when borrowing in GBP. The amount that I have to borrow is 120 lakhs. The spot rate of GBP is 80.0650. 1 plus NR. R is 6% for 3 months. Multiply by forward rate 80.035 minus the principal amount. Right? When I do this calculation, I'll get my net liability as Indian rupees 1,75,436.20. So if I borrow the money from US, bring it to India, use it for 3 months, return it back to US, the net expense that I will incur is 1,73,000. If I borrow the money from euros, bring the money to India, use it and then return it back, my net liability will be 1,72,860.72. And if I borrow from in terms of Great Britain pound, then my net liability will be 1,75,436. I want my net liability to be minimum, right? So borrowing should be done in conclusion. Borrowing done in euros as net liability is least. Right? Next, let's see another sum of this kind. Now in this sum, you had only one-way rates. Suppose if I have two-way rates, how would I do the same sum? Suppose if you have currency, wait, let's write the question first. You want to borrow 5 million INR. I need 5 million INR for 6 months. The various choices that I have are the currencies in which I can borrow. I can directly borrow from Indian Bank. I can borrow from USD INR rate. I can borrow from euros and I can borrow in Great Britain pound, sterling pounds that is. So these are my 4 options, right? The spot rate for the 4 options are, I'm borrowing in Indian rupee, I'll return in Indian rupee, so there's no spot rate for that. There's no currency exchange rate. This is 48.8830, 48.8860. This is 65.2545, 65.2575, and this is 90.4750 and 90.4780. This is my spot code, right? My forward code, bid and ask for USD INR is 49.2330, 49.2330, 49.2360. This is 65.5545, 65.5545, 65.5575, and this is 90.6750, 90.6780. Now let's consider the rate of interest. Interest rates. In India it is 5.756, 5.756%, 4.25, 4.5, 4.755, and 5.25, 5.5. Right? That's your sum given to you. From where should I borrow the money so that my net liability is minimum? Right? Now I've already explained this sum to you when one-way rates are given to you. Here, two-way rates are given to you. So let's first find out how do I calculate this. First, let's find out net liability in INR. I'm borrowing the money in Indian rupee. I'm going to use it in India. Right? I have to borrow 5 million. Right? Now 1 plus NR upon 100, P 1 plus N, I have to borrow for 6 months, and R, right? Now if I'm borrowing, that means I'll have to take the lending rate. The lending rate of the bank is 6% into R, and this is R, N is 6 months, right? There's going to be no reconversion because I'm borrowing in Indian rupees, I'm using in India. So minus the 5 lakhs. This is going to be my net liability if I borrow in Indian rupees, right? Yes, 50 lakhs, sorry. Right? Two interest rates are given to me, deposit rate and lending rate. Obviously, since I'm borrowing, I'll have to consider the lending rate. Now, if I calculate this, my net liability here is going to be 1,50,000. That will be the net interest that I will end up paying for 6 months if I borrow 50 lakhs, right? Next, suppose let's consider net liability in US, net liability when borrowing in USD. Borrowing in US dollars. Right? I have to borrow 50 lakhs. Right? Now they've given you two rates for spot, bid and ask. You have to always divide by the bid. So the bid rate is going to be 48.8830. Right? Question: why do I have to divide by bid rate? Because this is the amount of foreign currency that is going to be sold to the bank, which would yield the required amount, right? This is the amount of foreign currency that I need to buy Indian rupees. If I'm going to transfer the money from US to India, I need to buy Indian rupees. Buy, that means I have to consider the bid rate, right? Into 1 plus NR. Yes, you want to ask me something?
So it's 48.88.
8830. Right? Okay. 1 plus NR upon 100. I'm borrowing money. That means I have to consider the lending rate. The lending rate in US is 4.5 upon 100. I want to borrow for 6 months. 6 months, after which I will be transferring the Indian currency back to US dollar to repay the loan. Now, in that case, I will be selling Indian rupees, right? I will be transferring the money back after 6 months. I want to sell. Sell means I will have to consider the ask rate. Ask rate is 49.2360 minus the principal amount, 50 lakhs. So the net liability that I will incur in this case is going to be 1,49,419. This will be the liability if I borrow the money from US, use it in India, send it back to US to repay the loan. Suppose let's assume I borrow the money in euro. Net liability when borrowing in euro, right? I want to borrow 50 lakhs. If I'm going to borrow 50 lakhs, I'm going to get that money into India. If I'm going to get the money into India, I'm going to get euros into India. I'm going to buy Indian currency. That means I need to consider the bid rate. I'm going to get the currency today. That means I have to consider the spot rate. I have to consider the spot bid rate, 65.2545. 1 plus I'm borrowing. That means I have to consider the lending rate for 6 months, after which the currency would be transferred back to euro. That means I'll be selling Indian rupees after 6 months. So I'll consider a forward rate. I'll be selling Indian rupees. That means I have to consider the ask rate, 65.5575 minus 50 lakhs. The net liability that I will incur in Indian rupees is going to be 1,48,797. 1,48,797. Right? Next, the fourth option is borrowing in Great Britain pound. Net liability when borrowing in sterling pounds. I have to borrow 50 lakhs. I want to borrow today. That means I have to consider spot rate. I'm going to get Great Britain pounds into India. That means I need to buy Indian currency. That means I have to consider the bid rate, 90.4750. 1 plus I'm borrowing. If I'm borrowing in Great Britain pound, I'll have to consider the lending rate. The lending rate is 5.5 upon 100. I'm borrowing for 6 months. After 6 months, the money has to be transferred back to UK, right? I'll be selling Indian currency. So after 6 months, I have to consider the ask rate, which is 90.6780 minus the principal amount, 50 lakhs, right? When you solve this, your net liability here will be Indian rupees 1,49,027. Now out of the 4 currencies, I have the least liability when I borrow in GBP, right? So borrowing.
Sir, euro.
Sir, euro. Euro. 1,40,000.
Yes. Borrowing is done in euro as net liability is least. So you will be borrowing in euros because your net liability is going to be least in euro. Fine, do we get this thing clear? So do you understand how do we do this sum? You generally get this sum in the paper. This sum generally comes in the paper in section B for 10 marks, right? Where you have to only find out where is the net liability, right? I'll put up a sum for you all to solve. Let's see another sum, guys. Currency. Borrow 8 million for 6 months. Borrow 8 million for 6 months. Quiet please. Currency. You have 4 currencies: INR, USD INR, next Euro INR, and you have Sterling Pounds INR. Spot rate is given to you as 48.8830, 48.8860, 65.2545, 65.2575. Next 90.4750, 90.4780. That's my spot rate. Forward rate. The forward rate is 49.2330, 49.2330, 49.2360, 65.5545, 65.5575, then 90.6750, 90.6780. The interest rates are given to you as 5.65 and 5.9, 4.25, 4.5, 4.75 and 5, and last is 5.25 and 5.5. Those are my interest rates. You have to find out, if I'm borrowing 8 million Indian rupees, which country is it better to borrow from, right? We'll stop this here for the day. Thank you very much.